On April 5th, 1944, the village of Klissura in western Macedonia, Greece, was engulfed in flames. It was Holy Week, a time that should have been for prayer. Instead, the small village was reduced to ashes. More than 280 civilians lost their lives. And the village was nearly wiped out. By nightfall, many had no home left to return to. They were women, children, and the elderly, unarmed, with no means of defense. The village was plunged into mourning. The dead were hastily buried in the overcrowded cemetery. Silence hung over Klissura, broken only by smoldering ruins and blackened walls. After that day, Klissura entered the war records, remembered as one of the Greek villages completely destroyed by the occupying forces. What led this small community to suffer such a tragedy? And why, on the morning of April 5th, did Nazi troops descend upon Klissura? On April 6, 1941, hundreds of Luftwaffe warplanes rained bombs down on Belgrade. It was the opening strike of the campaign to subdue Yugoslavia. As Belgrade endured relentless air raids by the Luftwaffe, Operation Marita was launched at the same time. The German army moved to invade Greece, not only to secure the strategic corridor through the Balkans, but also to halt British influence in the Mediterranean. To Berlin, Greece was the key gateway to the Aegean Sea. The supply lines and control of the Balkans would be threatened if Britain were allowed to maintain a foothold there for too long. The spearhead of the invasion was Germany's 12th Army, commanded by Field Marshal Wilhelm List. With a force of about 680,000 men, it was a massive formation that brought together elite units. It included panzer divisions, motorized infantry, and strong Luftwaffe support. Notably, it also fielded Fallschirmjäger paratroopers. In the opening days, German paratroopers were deployed at key bridges, crossroads, and strategic high ground. They cleared the way for tanks and infantry to push south. In the air, Juncker's bombers of the Luftwaffe relentlessly struck cities and defensive positions. This left Greece's ability to resist almost paralyzed, even with the support of British and Commonwealth forces, primarily Anzac troops from Australia and New Zealand. Greece remained at a severe disadvantage. Allied units defending along the Olympus mountain line could not withstand the overwhelming coordination of German armor and air power. In just 3 weeks, the entire defensive line was shattered. Thessaloniki fell after only a few days of fierce fighting. By April 27, 1941, the capital, Athens, was in Axis hands. This marked the complete collapse of Greece on the mainland. The invasion was swift, brutal, and devastating. It left an entire nation completely subdued. Under the heel of fascism, German troops and their Bulgarian allies marched into Klissura. Within hours, hundreds of lives were taken. Many families could not escape the flames that engulfed their own homes. The fires raged, consuming rooftops and the lives trapped inside. Chaos echoed in the sounds of half-burned wooden walls collapsing. Terror spread everywhere, turning Klissura into a wound that would never heal in Greece's memory. World War II erupted on September 1st, 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. Germany employed the Blitzkrieg tactic, a lightning-fast coordination of panzer divisions, the Luftwaffe, and Wehrmacht infantry. Poland collapsed within weeks, partitioned between Germany and the Soviet Union under the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. In 1940, Germany continued its string of rapid victories. In April, it occupied Norway and Denmark. Then, in just 6 weeks between May and June, Germany defeated the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. The Allied evacuation at Dunkirk during May-June 1940 took place amid this collapse, marking the failure of Britain and France in Western Europe. Following these triumphs, Hitler set his sights on his most ambitious plan, Operation Barbarossa. This was the invasion of the Soviet Union, scheduled for the summer of 1941. The German army mobilized over 3 million troops, along with thousands of tanks and aircraft. The campaign was divided into 3 main offensives, aimed at Leningrad, Moscow, and Kiev. The goal was to destroy the Red Army, while also seizing oil and grain, to serve Germany's vision of living space, Lebensraum. But before launching it, Hitler was forced to secure his southern flank, the Balkans. He wanted to guarantee the supply routes for Romanian oil, while eliminating the threat from Greece, where British forces were stationed. Greece became a strategic target after it repelled the Italian invasion in October 1940. Mussolini's failure forced Nazi Germany to intervene in order to reinforce the Axis. After Greece fell to Nazi occupation, Hitler established control over the entire region. But the occupation did not bring peace. From the rugged mountains, resistance began to rise. The people called them the Undartes, small, mobile guerrilla units. They hid within the terrain and struck without warning. At first scattered, they soon united under the leadership of the National Liberation Front, EAM, and its military arm, ELAS. Both organizations were founded by members of the Greek Communist Party. ELAS carried out ambushes, destroyed bridges and roads, and struck supply lines. They also received strong support from local peasants. In the eyes of the German authorities, this was more than just a resistance movement because of its communist character and its potential to spread. The Wehrmacht and SS labeled them as criminals. They became targets for suppression. Every convoy attacked, every outpost destroyed was met with harsh reprisals. These were not isolated acts of anger. They were part of the total war policy Germany imposed on occupied Europe, spreading fear to crush resistance. Villages were encircled, homes were burned, and civilians became victims, an unforgiving pattern of all-out war. On the night of April 4th, 1944, about 150 to 300, Greek partisans gathered under the command of Alexandros Rosios. He was one of the prominent leaders of ELAS. Intelligence had reported that at dawn the next day, a German convoy would pass through the Duli Pass. It was transporting goods and property confiscated from Jewish shops in Castoria. At first light on April 5th, the convoy entered a narrow arched bridge. Just as the lead motorcycle reached the span, the partisans opened fire. 3 German soldiers were killed instantly, while 2 motorcycles and a car were destroyed. The sudden gunfire threw the convoy into chaos. Some partisans rushed forward, seizing weapons and destroying several more vehicles, before retreating back into the mountains. They left behind a haunting scene, a message of defiance aimed at the Germans. Rosios and his men believed the Germans would be cautious. They thought the occupiers would not dare strike women, children, or the elderly. But in reality, this attack became the spark. For the German officers, it was an insult that could not be ignored. The quiet village of Klissura was immediately marked as the target. On the morning of April 5th, 1944, after the ambush of the German convoy, the Undartes guerrilla unit led by Alexandros Rosios quickly withdrew from Klissura. They moved along the mountain slopes to avoid a counterattack. Before leaving, they reassured the villagers that the Germans would only target the men, those capable of fighting back. Women, children, and the elderly, they insisted, would not be harmed. That belief drove the men of the village to scatter. Some fled into the forests, others sought refuge in nearby villages, while a few hid in distant monasteries. They left behind their homes, entrusting the safety of their families to that assumption. Inside the village, the atmosphere grew heavy with fear. Mothers clutched their children tightly. The elderly sat on porches, gazing out at the main road, hoping the Germans would simply pass through. Silence was broken only by whispered prayers, a fragile hope that nothing worse would come. That afternoon, German troops of the 4th SS Panzer Grenadier Division, under Obersturmbannführer Karl Schumers, together with Bulgarian soldiers commanded by Anton Kochev, entered Klissura. They marched slowly, outwardly calm. Some even pretended to be friendly. They signaled for the villagers to gather in the square and along the main road, as if only to check papers or ask questions. After hours of tense waiting, the people began to breathe easier. They thought perhaps disaster would not strike, but that sense of relief was only a mask. At that moment, a detachment of SS troops along with Bulgarian soldiers stormed in. Gunfire erupted, plunging the village into chaos. Screams tore through the air. Villagers tried to flee, but were blocked at every turn. Many families collapsed right on their doorsteps. Smoke from gunfire filled the narrow alleys. The Germans did not stop. They swept through every house. Anyone found was executed on the spot. Some were shot instantly where they stood. The school, the library, and the church were set ablaze. Flames roared, consuming timbers as they collapsed. More than 150 homes went up in a sea of fire. Those who sought shelter inside their houses quickly became trapped. The inferno devoured every escape. The cries of children echoed in their parents' arms, then fell silent as the roofs came crashing down. Amid the devastation, Father Yorgos Mitras stepped forward, holding a cross. He knelt, praying for mercy for his villagers. His prayer was cut short by gunfire. For nearly 2 hours, the violence did not cease. The square lay silent, filled only with black smoke and the stench of burning. Around 5 p.m., a signal flare was fired. The gunfire stopped. The SS unit withdrew. After the massacre of April 5, 1944, the villagers of Klissura returned from the surrounding forests. They were met with a scene of horror. Bodies lay scattered among the ruins. Many victims were charred beyond recognition. When the smoke cleared, only piles of cold ash remained. The smell of fire still clung to the shattered walls. The survivors came back and quietly buried their loved ones in their own yards. The air was heavy with smoke and grief. The village cemetery was far too small to hold all the victims. People were forced to bury the dead in their courtyards, in the churchyard, and even in makeshift graves dug along the hillsides. The cries of mourning, mingled with the smell of burning, became an enduring memory of Klissura. The attack had struck during Holy Week, the most sacred time in the Orthodox calendar. That made the pain even deeper. Klissura was not just a destroyed village. It became a symbol of sacrifice and national sorrow. The stories of the victims, women, children, even Father Yorgos Mitras, were passed down through generations. They were etched into the collective memory of Greece. The massacre turned Klissura into a historical testament. It stands as a reminder of Nazi brutality and of the unbroken spirit of the Greek people in the face of oppression. After the Klissura massacre of April 5, 1944, Karl Schumers was summoned by the German army to testify at a headquarters in the Balkans. The case sparked controversy, even within the Nazi ranks. Hermann Neubacher, the political envoy in southeastern Europe, called it a brutal act of repression. He argued that it violated official reprisal policy. Before the military council, Schumers testified that his unit had been ambushed by Andarte's guerrillas from inside the village. Therefore, they had been forced to respond in the chaos. He accused the partisans of using villagers as human shields, but survivors refuted his claims. Escaped villagers and even some German soldiers stated that the troops entered Klissura without resistance and carried out indiscriminate reprisals, despite these clear contradictions. The council accepted Schumers' account. He escaped punishment and remained in command. After the war, investigations by Greece. And the Allies proved that Schumer's testimony was false. No guerrillas had been inside the village at the time of the massacre. Schumer's was killed on August 18th, 1944, when his vehicle struck a mine. A fate delivered by war, not by a court of justice. Meanwhile, Andan Kochev, the Bulgarian officer who colluded in the massacre, was tried in Greece. In August 1948, he was sentenced to death. Justice came, but only in fragments. Klissura continued to bear its lasting grief. The 280 victims never regained their voices. The massacre, along with other atrocities, was seared into Greece's memory. It became a testament to both the brutality of war and the imperfection of justice. After the attack on Klissura, the 4th SS Panzer Grenadier Division, once feared in Western Macedonia, entered its decline. At first, it was an elite force of 9,000 men, supported by armored vehicles and assault guns. But during the campaigns in Serbia in September 1944, the division suffered heavy losses fighting Yugoslav partisans and Allied forces. By December 1944, the division had been reduced to about 800 men, and 13 operational assault guns, nearly 90% of its strength lost, pushed back into Slovakia and then driven onto German soil. The unit fought alongside the 1st Panzer Corps in desperate defensive battles. By early 1945, the division had nearly disintegrated, merging into the collapse of Nazi Germany. This reflected the failure of the brutal repressive strategy they had once carried out in Klissura. Meanwhile, Greece regained its freedom in October 1944. German forces withdrew under pressure from the Allies, primarily the British, together with Greek resistance groups, especially EAM/ELAS, coordinated campaigns, making use of the mountainous terrain, weakened the Germans through a series of ambushes and acts of sabotage. On October 12, 1944, Athens was liberated. Crowds filled the streets, and Greek flags waved over the ruined buildings. But joy was mingled with grief. 4 years of occupation left scars that could never be erased. During World War II, about 350,000 Greeks lost their lives. They included civilians, resistance fighters, and more than 60,000 Jews who were deported to camps such as Auschwitz and Treblinka. Major cities like Athens and Thessaloniki were devastated. Ports, roads, and bridges were heavily damaged. The economy collapsed, famine spread, and society was torn apart. All of this paved the way for civil war after liberation. The Klissura massacre, together with atrocities such as Distomo, became symbols of the brutality under Nazi rule and of national suffering. The stories of the 280 victims, of Father Georgis Mitras, of the homes reduced to ashes, were passed down through generations. The spirit of resistance of the Andartes and the liberation of 1944 stand as reminders of the unyielding strength of the Greek people. Klissura was not just a local tragedy. It was part of a national history of pain, a lesson on the cost of war and the value of freedom. You are watching Case X channel. We thank you for joining us on this journey through the historical record. If you found this content valuable, consider subscribing so you don't miss our upcoming analyses. See you in the next episode.